The sound of the lock clicking shut made Grace Jackson's blood run cold. She was lying in Vincent Lombardi's bed, the most dangerous man in Chicago's bed, and he was standing at the door with his hands still on the deadbolt, his steel-gray eyes fixed on her like a predator studying prey. Not moving, not speaking, just watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with something between fear and something else. Something she didn't want to name. Mr. Lombardi, I can explain. Her voice came out smaller than she intended, swallowed by the massive bedroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The silk sheets beneath her felt expensive. Wrong. A poor black girl from the South Side had no business touching anything in this penthouse, let alone sleeping in the boss's bed. Vincent loosened his tie with one hand, the motion slow and deliberate. The late afternoon sun cast his face half in shadow, accentuating the sharp line of his jaw, the small scar above his left eyebrow that she'd noticed during her first week as his maid, but never dared ask about. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who could enter life with a phone call and sleep soundly afterward. When did you last sleep, Grace? His voice was quieter than she expected. Not angry. Something worse. Concerned. The question threw her. What? Sleep. A full night. 8 hours. When? He moved closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His shoulder holster was visible now, the black leather stark against his white dress shirt, the gun nestled there like a promise. Her mind spun. This wasn't how getting fired worked. This wasn't how anything worked. Maybe 3 days ago. I have 2 jobs, Mr. Lombardi. I'm fine. I just need to. 4 days. He stopped at the foot of the bed. I know because I've been watching you fall asleep standing up while dusting my library, nodding off while folding laundry in the West Wing. You're killing yourself in my house, Grace. What? Heat flooded her cheeks. You been watching her? Medical bills. My mama has lupus. The treatments cost $3,000 a month and insurance won't. She caught herself. You didn't tell Vincent Lombardi your problems. You definitely didn't explain why you were incompetent enough to fall asleep on the job. Something shifted in his expression. Too fast to read. He pulled out his phone, typed something with his thumb, then pocketed it. You're not fired. She blinked. I'm not. No. He shrugged off his suit jacket, draped it over the leather chair by the window. The movement was casual, practiced, but it made her heart hammer faster because what the hell was happening? But you're also not leaving this room. The fear came back, sharp and immediate. Mr. Lombardi. Vincent. He started rolling up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with old scars. White lines against olive skin. Stories she'd never hear. If you're going to sleep in my bed, Grace, you should use my first name. I don't understand what's happening right now. Her voice shook. She hated that it shook. What's happening is simple. He gestured to the bed. You're going to sleep. Really sleep. And I'm going to make sure you do it. His eyes held hers. The door stays locked because if I leave it open, you'll try to sneak out and go to your night job cleaning office buildings. Don't think I don't know about that, either. He was right. She absolutely would have. In the morning, we'll discuss your employment situation. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. I texted my accountant. Your mother's medical bills, past, present, and future, are paid. She'll have access to the best specialists in the country. Consider it done. The room tilted. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. $340,000 for the next 5 years, according to my calculations. He said it like he was discussing the weather, like he hadn't just obliterated the crushing weight that had been suffocating her for 2 years. It's nothing. It's not nothing. She was on her feet now, hands clenched into fists. Why would you do that? What do you want from me? Because there was always a price. Men like Vincent Lombardi didn't just hand out small fortunes. They collected debts. They owned people. His expression softened, barely, just a flicker around his eyes. What do I want? He took a step closer, then another. I want you to stop dying in front of me. I want you to eat a full meal and sleep through the night and remember what it feels like to breathe without drowning. What? The word came out as a whisper. Why do you care? Because he stopped himself, shook his head. Sleep, Grace. We'll talk tomorrow. Then he was gone, and the lock clicked from the outside, and she was alone in Vincent Lombardi's bedroom with silk sheets and questions that had no safe answers. But to understand how Grace Jackson, a girl who'd spent 26 years being invisible, ended up locked in a mafia boss's bedroom, you need to go back 6 months. Back to the day she walked through the gold-trimmed doors of the Lombardi estate with sweating palms and a degree she couldn't afford to use, desperate enough to clean houses for the kind of man her mother had warned her about. Back to the day she lied on her resume and hoped to God he wouldn't notice. Before we continue with Grace's story, can I ask you something? I spend 15 to 20 hours researching, writing, and perfecting each story for you. That's nearly a full week of work to create these cinematic experiences completely free. While you're here enjoying this story, YouTube only shows it to a tiny fraction of people unless you take just 2 seconds to hit subscribe. Here's the thing. If just half of you watching right now subscribe, this channel would explode, and I could create even deeper, more complex stories for you every single week. But only about 3% of viewers are subscribed. That means 97% of you are enjoying hours of content, but haven't taken that tiny step. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for a single click that tells YouTube, show this to more people. So here's my request. If you're enjoying Grace's story so far, click subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and means everything to this channel's survival. Also, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing this global community we're building. Last video, we had viewers from 47 different countries. Now, let's get back to the story, because what happens next changes everything for Grace. 6 months earlier, Grace had stood in Vincent Lombardi's study with her forged references clutched in her hand and her heart in her throat. The room smelled like leather and old money. Mahogany desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, crystal decanter of amber liquid that probably cost more than her car. He'd sat behind that desk, studying her resume with those unsettling gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed lies. Associate's degree in business administration from Roosevelt University. He looked up. Why are you applying to be a maid? Because her real degree was in computer science from MIT. Because she'd spent 3 years working for the FBI's cybercrime division. Because 6 months ago, she'd been the best data analyst they had, until she'd stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see. Until her partner had been killed and she'd run. Until she needed to disappear. Because being educated doesn't pay medical bills, she said instead. It wasn't entirely a lie. Her mother did have lupus. The bills were real. Everything else was fiction. I need the money, Mr. Lombardi. And I'm good at what I do. I'll work harder than anyone else you could hire. He'd studied her for a long moment. Long enough that she wondered if he could smell the lies. If he knew that Grace Jackson was really Grace Mitchell, that she was running from people who wanted her dead, that working for him was the only place the FBI wouldn't think to look. You start Monday, he said finally. That was it. No background check, or at least not one deep enough to find her real identity. No questions about why a woman with a business degree wanted to scrub floors. Just a job and a paycheck that would keep her invisible. She thought she was so clever. The first week, she'd kept her head down and her mouth shut. Rosa, the head cook, a round Italian woman in her 60s who ran the kitchen like a battlefield commander, had taken one look at Grace and declared her too skinny and too sad. Teddy, the head of security, had been less welcoming. He'd watched her with suspicious eyes, clearly not trusting the new hire. Grace had ignored them both. She'd cleaned bathrooms and changed sheets and stayed invisible, just like she needed to be. She'd mapped the security cameras, old habit from her FBI days. She noted the patterns of the guards' rotations. She'd observed that Vincent kept his study locked when he wasn't in it, that he received visitors at odd hours, that sometimes men came to the penthouse with blood on their sleeves. She told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't FBI anymore. She was just a maid. Then Vincent had started watching her. She'd noticed it in the second week. The way his eyes would track her when she entered a room. The way he'd pause his conversations when she walked by. Once, she'd caught him staring at her while she was organizing his bookshelf. Really staring, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. It had terrified her, because if Vincent Lombardi looked too closely, he'd see what she'd buried. He'd see that she moved like someone with tactical training, that her hands were too steady, her awareness too sharp, that she was watching him just as carefully as he watched her. By the third week, he'd started talking to her. Small things at first. "Good morning, Grace. Coffee's excellent today, thank you." Then longer conversations. Questions about her mother's health. Comments about the book she'd been reading in her break. A dense economics textbook she'd forgotten to hide. "Interesting choice for light reading," he'd said, picking it up from the side table. Her stomach had dropped. "I like to stay sharp." Clearly, he'd handed it back. Most people with business degrees don't read Keynesian economic theory for fun. Most people don't have to choose between their education and their survival. Something had shifted in his expression then. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "No," he'd said quietly. "They don't." That was when she'd realized Vincent Lombardi was dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with his gun or his reputation. He was dangerous because he paid attention, because he saw people, because he saw her. The fourth month was when everything started to unravel. Grace had been working her night shift at the First Chicago Bank Tower, her second job, the one she'd taken to maintain her cover, and because standing still made her an easier target, when she'd noticed something. A pattern in the building's security logs. Office suites being accessed at odd hours. Data being transferred from terminals that should have been locked down. She told herself to ignore it. She wasn't FBI anymore. It wasn't her problem. But old habits died hard. She dug deeper. She traced the data transfers. And she discovered that someone was using the bank systems to launder money for the Corsetti family, Vincent's biggest rivals. She should have walked away. Should have deleted her traces and pretended she'd never seen it. But the analyst in her had kept digging. She'd mapped the entire operation, identified the players, built a case file on her encrypted laptop that she kept hidden in her apartment, just in case the FBI came looking, just in case she needed leverage. She hadn't realized Vincent's people were watching the same building. It was Teddy who'd confronted her. She'd been leaving her shift at 2 a.m., exhausted and not paying enough attention, when he'd materialized from the shadows like a nightmare. "We need to talk, Grace." Her training had kicked in. She'd assessed exits, calculated distances, reached for the pepper spray in her purse. "Don't." His voice was flat. "I'm not here to hurt you, but the boss wants to see you. Now." The drive to the penthouse had been silent. Teddy hadn't answered her questions, hadn't even looked at her. Just drove through Chicago's empty streets while Grace's mind raced through scenarios. They knew. Somehow they knew. Maybe they'd tracked her digital footprint. Maybe someone had recognized her from her FBI days. Maybe Vincent had been waiting in his study, still in his suit despite the hour, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his expression unreadable. "Sit down, Grace." She'd sat, kept her hands steady through sheer force of will. "How long have you been investigating the Corsetti operation at First Chicago?" He'd asked it conversationally, like he was asking about the weather. Her mind had gone blank, then into overdrive. Deny everything. Stick to your cover. "I don't know what you're." "Please." He'd set down his glass. "I've had my IT specialist tracking unusual activity on that building's network for weeks. Someone very skilled has been building a comprehensive case file on the Corsetti family's money laundering operation. Someone with law enforcement training." His eyes had met hers. "Want to try again?" The room had felt too small, too hot. "Are you going to kill me?" "That depends." He'd stood, moved around the desk. "Who are you really, Grace Jackson? Or is that even your real name?" She made a choice then, a calculated risk, because Vincent Lombardi was smart enough to find out the truth eventually. And at least this way, she controlled the narrative. "Grace Mitchell," she'd said quietly. "Former FBI data analyst. Cybercrime division. I've been in witness protection for 6 months." He'd gone very still. "Why?" "Because I found evidence of a leak in the bureau. Someone high up selling case files to organized crime families. My partner tried to expose it." Her voice had cracked. "They killed him. Made it look like a robbery. I ran before they could do the same to me. And you came to work for me." It wasn't a question. It was the one place they'd never look. Why would a federal fugitive work for a known Mafia boss? She met his eyes. "I kept my head down. Did my job. I wasn't investigating you, Mr. Lombardi. I was investigating the Corsettis because she'd stopped. Because they're the ones who bought the information that got my partner killed. The silence had stretched between them. Vincent had studied her with those two sharp eyes, and she'd waited for the verdict. For him to call Teddy back in. For everything to end. Instead, he'd said, "Show me what you found." That night, sitting in his study with her laptop between them, Grace had shown Vincent Lombardi everything. The money laundering operation. The corrupt FBI agents on the Corsetti payroll. The connections to her partner's murder. She'd laid out 6 months of careful investigation, and he'd absorbed it all with the focus of a predator planning a hunt. "This is good work," he'd said finally. "Better than good. You could bring down half of Chicago's underworld with this." "I'm not trying to bring anyone down. I'm trying to survive." "And what? You're going to sit on this forever? Let your partner's murderers walk free." "What choice do I have?" She'd heard the bitterness in her own voice. "I go to the FBI, I'm dead. I go public, I'm dead. I'm a ghost, Mr. Lombardi. Ghosts don't get justice." He'd looked at her for a long moment. Then he'd made a decision she still didn't fully understand. "Work for me," he'd said. "Not as a maid, as an analyst. Use these skills you're wasting on cleaning floors. Help me navigate the digital landscape of my business operations, legitimate and otherwise. And in return, I'll help you get justice for your partner." "Why would you do that?" "Because the Corsettis are a problem I've been meaning to solve. Because having someone with your skills on my team is worth more than whatever risk you pose. And because," he'd stopped, shaken his head, "because I've been watching you for 4 months, Grace Mitchell, and I know what it looks like when someone's drowning. I'm throwing you a rope. The question is whether you're smart enough to grab it." She grabbed it. Over the next 2 months, Grace had become Vincent's secret weapon. She'd moved from maid to operations analyst, though only a handful of people knew about her real role. To everyone else, she was still just the quiet girl who cleaned the penthouse. But in Vincent's study, late at night, she'd shown him how to track digital footprints, secure his communications, and identify threats in the data streams his organization generated. And she kept building her case against the Corsettis, against the corrupt FBI agents, against everyone who'd stolen her life. Vincent had kept his word. He'd protected her. More than that, he'd seen her, not as a tool or a liability, but as a person. He'd noticed when she was tired. He'd made sure she ate. He'd asked about her mother and then, without being asked, had arranged for better medical care. Somewhere in those late-night strategy sessions, something had shifted between them. The professional distance had eroded. She caught him staring at her mouth when she talked. He'd started sitting closer. Their hands had brushed, reaching for the same document, and the electric shock of that contact had made them both freeze. "This is a bad idea," she'd whispered. "Terrible," he'd agreed, but he hadn't moved away. "You're my boss. You're a criminal. I'm supposed to be invisible." "Grace." His voice had been rough. "You've never been invisible. Not to me." That was when the walls had started to crumble. When professional became personal. When a mafia boss and the fugitive analyst had started becoming something else entirely. Which brought her to 3 days ago. To working herself to exhaustion because she'd been tracking a lead on the FBI mole. To falling asleep in Vincent's bed while changing his sheets because she'd been awake for 72 hours straight. To waking up locked in his room while he paid her mother's medical bills and looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken. Now, lying alone in his bed with the city lights painting shadows on the ceiling, Grace had to face a truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was falling for Vincent Lombardi. And in their world, that was the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. The next morning, Grace woke to sunlight and the smell of espresso. She'd slept for 12 hours straight. Her body felt heavy, relaxed in a way she barely remembered. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the note on the nightstand. Bold, masculine handwriting. Meeting until noon. Rosa has breakfast. Shower and change. Clothes in the closet. We talk when I return. V. The closet held designer jeans in her exact size, soft sweaters, shoes that probably cost more than her monthly salary used to be. Everything fit perfectly. Of course it did. Vincent paid attention to details. Rosa was waiting in the kitchen with eggs, fresh bread, and espresso so good Grace wanted to cry. The older woman had studied her with knowing eyes and said in her broken English, "About time Vincenzo got his head out of his ass." "We're not. It's not like that," Grace had protested. Rosa had just laughed. "Tesoro, he locked you in his bedroom and paid your mama's medical bills. It's exactly like that." She'd leaned closer. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" What was she going to do about it? Grace had spent the morning wandering the penthouse, seeing it with new eyes. Not as an employee, not as someone hiding, as someone who might possibly belong here. The thought terrified her. Vincent returned at noon exactly, still in his suit, but with exhaustion around his eyes. Whatever meeting he'd attended hadn't been pleasant. "My study," he said. Not an order. An invitation. She'd followed him there, and he'd poured 2 glasses of whiskey before settling behind his desk. The space felt different now. More intimate. Charged with things neither of them had said out loud. "Here's the situation," Vincent said. "My legitimate businesses are growing faster than I can manage alone. I need someone I trust to help run them. Someone who thinks like you do, strategically, thoroughly, with actual intelligence instead of brute force." He paused. "I want you for the position. Officially. Publicly. 200,000 a year to start, plus benefits, plus profit sharing." Grace's mind reeled. "You want me to run your legitimate operations? I want you to be my operations manager. Handle the day-to-day of the restaurants, the construction company, the real estate holdings. Free me up to focus on the more delicate aspects of my business." His eyes held hers. "You'd be good at it. Better than good. And the other work, the investigation, continues. But separately. I won't risk exposing you by mixing the two." He leaned forward. "This is a real offer, Grace. A real job. A real life, not just hiding in shadows." "Why?" The question had become her constant refrain. "Why do all this for me?" Vincent had stood then, moved around the desk. He'd stopped in front of her chair, close enough that she'd had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Because somewhere between watching you fall asleep standing up and watching you dismantle the Corsetti operation with nothing but a laptop and brilliance, you stopped being just an employee." His hand had come up, tucked a curl behind her ear. "You became important. To me. Personally." Her breath had caught. "That's dangerous. I'm aware." His thumb had traced her cheekbone. "I'm also aware that you're brilliant, beautiful, and currently running from people who want you dead. That you work yourself to exhaustion because you're terrified that if you stop moving, everything will fall apart. That you hum Aretha Franklin when you think no one's listening and you cry in the supply closet when you're overwhelmed. You're not supposed to notice those things. Grace." His voice had dropped to something rough. "I notice everything about you. Half from the beginning. The way you move like someone with tactical training. The way your eyes track exits and threats. The way you watch me like you're waiting for me to become a monster." He leaned closer. "I'm not a good man, but I'm good to the people who matter to me. And you matter. So I'm asking, take the job. Stay here. Let me keep you safe while we bring down the people who killed your partner. And if I say no, then the offer stands anyway. Your mother's bills stay paid. You can walk away and I won't stop you." "But Grace," his forehead had touched hers. "Please don't say no." She should have. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was insane. That Vincent Lombardi was dangerous. That falling for him would only end in blood and regret. But when she'd looked into those gray eyes, she hadn't seen a monster. She'd seen a man who'd noticed her when she was trying to be invisible, who'd paid for her mother's care without asking for anything in return, who'd given her a weapon to fight back against the people who destroyed her life, who'd looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world. "Okay," she'd whispered. "Yes, I'll take the job." And she'd made herself say it. "And I want to see where this goes. Between us." The smile that had broken across his face had transformed him, made him look younger, happier. Yeah. But Vincent, I need honesty. All of it. What you do, who you are, what I'm getting into. No more secrets. No more secrets, he'd agreed. Then he'd kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. And Grace had let herself fall. That had been 6 months ago. 6 months of learning Vincent's world from the inside. 6 months of running his legitimate businesses by day and hunting her enemies by night. 6 months of falling deeper in love with a man who was equal parts danger and devotion. It hadn't been easy. Vincent's world was complicated, full of power plays and politics, of men who tested her because she was young and black and female, of violence that happened in shadows but left bloodstains in daylight. But Grace had held her own. She'd earned respect through competence and strategy, through being smarter than the men who underestimated her. And Vincent had been there, protecting her when necessary, standing back when she needed to fight her own battles, teaching her the unwritten rules of his world while learning to navigate the digital landscape she commanded. They become partners, in business, in bed, in the careful dance of building something real amid the chaos of their lives. Until the day everything exploded. It started with a phone call. Grace had been in her new office, real office, top floor of Lombardi Industries, when her encrypted line rang. Only 3 people had that number: Vincent, Teddy, and her FBI handler from her previous life, a man she trusted because he'd helped her disappear. Grace. Agent Tom Richards' voice was urgent. You need to disappear. Now. They found you. Her blood had turned to ice. Who found me? Everyone. The mole at the bureau sold your location to the Corsettis. They're moving on you tonight. And Grace, Vincent Lombardi's been working with them. The world had tilted. That's not possible. I have recordings, financial transfers, meeting logs. Tom's voice had been gentle, pitying. I'm sorry. He played you. He's been using you to gather intel on FBI operations while feeding information to the Corsettis. The medical bills, the job, all of it. It was to gain your trust. No. But her analytical mind was already spinning. Vincent had access to everything she'd found. Every weakness in FBI operations. Every corrupt agent she'd identified. What if? There's a car outside your building. Gray sedan. Get in it. We'll relocate you. But you have to move now. Grace had hung up. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was racing through everything. Every conversation, every shared moment, looking for the lie. For the con. She'd pulled up her encrypted files, started tracing digital footprints, and she'd found them, carefully hidden, but there. Transfers from Vincent's accounts to Corsetti shell companies. Meeting records showing Vincent and the Corsetti boss, Sal, in the same locations. Communications that could be read as collusion. Her heart had shattered. Then her door had burst open. Teddy moving fast. Boss wants you in the car. Now. Says it's not safe. I bet he does. Grace had grabbed her laptop. Tell Vincent I quit. She'd made it to the elevator before Teddy caught her arm. Grace, wait. Something's wrong. There are Corsetti soldiers in the parking garage. This is a hit. Convenient that Vincent wants me in a car right when the Corsettis happen to show up. Teddy's face had gone hard. You think he'd betray you? I think the evidence doesn't lie. Then you're not as smart as he thinks you are. Teddy had pulled his gun. Either you trust me and we get you somewhere safe, or you walk into that parking garage and die. Choose. Grace had looked at this man who'd been Vincent's right hand for 20 years, who'd watch her with suspicion at first, but had slowly become something like a friend, who was currently putting himself between her and the elevator like he'd take a bullet for her. Where's Vincent? She'd asked. Dealing with the Corsettis. He found out about the hit an hour ago. He's buying you time to run. Or he's setting me up. Grace. Teddy had met her eyes. I've known Vincent since he was 15 years old. I watched him build this empire. I've seen him kill men who betrayed him without blinking. And I've never, not once, seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He'd burned Chicago to the ground before he'd let someone hurt you. She'd wanted to believe that. God, she'd wanted to believe it. But the evidence was right there on her laptop. The transfers, the meetings, the pattern of a long-term con. I need to think, she'd said. You need to survive. Teddy had pulled out his phone, texted something. Vincent's sending you to the safe house in Wisconsin. You'll be. The explosion had cut him off. The whole building had shaken. Alarms had started screaming. And through the window, Grace had seen fire blooming in the parking garage. Move. Teddy had grabbed her arm, and they'd run. The next 6 hours had been chaos. Teddy had gotten her out through a service entrance while the building evacuated. He'd put her in an unmarked car driven by one of Vincent's most trusted men. They'd driven north out of Chicago while Grace's phone had blown up with messages. From Vincent, stay with Teddy. Trust me, I'll explain everything. From Tom Richards, if you're still alive, call me. The Corsettis think they got you in the parking garage explosion. From an unknown number, you have something we want, Ms. Mitchell. We'll be in touch. Grace had stared at that last message, her analyst brain finally kicking into gear. She'd pulled out her laptop and started really digging. Not just looking at the surface evidence Tom had sent her. Looking deeper, tracing the digital footprints backward. And she'd found it. The manipulation. The carefully planted false evidence designed to make her think Vincent had betrayed her. The real transfers that showed Tom Richards, her trusted FBI handler, had been on the Corsetti payroll for years. The explosion at the parking garage hadn't been meant to kill her. It had been meant to destroy evidence, to cover Tom's tracks while he tried to convince Grace to run directly into the Corsetti's hands. Vincent hadn't betrayed her. He'd been protecting her, and she'd almost run straight into a trap. Turn around, she'd told the driver. Take me to Vincent. Now. She'd found him in a warehouse on the south side, surrounded by his soldiers, with blood on his knuckles and murder in his eyes. The 3 Corsetti soldiers tied to chairs in front of him were already beaten bloody. Vincent had looked up when she'd entered. Relief and rage had warred on his face. You were supposed to be in Wisconsin. You were supposed to tell me Tom Richards was dirty. Grace had shot back. I was handling it. By keeping secrets? I thought we agreed. No more secrets. I was protecting you. I don't need protection. I need partnership. She'd moved closer, ignoring the soldiers, ignoring the prisoners, seeing only him. You found out about Tom's betrayal, and you decided to deal with it alone instead of trusting me to handle it. What? Vincent had stood, and she'd seen the exhaustion in him, the fear. Because I already lost one person, he'd stopped. Started again. I couldn't risk you. If the Corsettis had gotten to you while I was gathering evidence on Tom, if something had happened, so you planted false evidence to make me think you were dirty, to make me run to Tom, so you could track his location and take him out before he could deliver me to the Corsettis. She'd pieced it together. That was your plan. That was my backup plan. My primary plan was handling this before you ever found out. He'd moved closer. Grace, I've been tracking Tom Richards for 3 months. Building a case. Gathering proof. I was a week away from having everything I needed to end him and the Corsettis and every corrupt agent who killed your partner. But they moved faster than I expected. You should have told me. I should have, he'd agreed quietly. I'm sorry. I was trying to protect you, and I forgot that you're not someone who needs protecting. You're someone who fights. Grace had looked at this man, this complicated, dangerous, devoted man, and made a choice. Show me what you have on Tom. All of it. And then we're going to finish this. Together. Vincent had smiled. Together. Over the next week, they dismantled everything. With Grace's digital expertise and Vincent's street-level intelligence, they'd exposed Tom Richards' corruption, identified every FBI agent on the Corsetti payroll, and built an airtight case against the people who'd killed her partner. They'd delivered it all to the one person Grace still trusted at the Bureau, her old supervisor, a woman who'd helped her disappear and who'd been hunting the mole from the inside. Within 48 hours, arrests had been made. Tom Richards and 6 other agents had been taken into federal custody. The Corsetti operation had collapsed, and Grace Mitchell had finally gotten justice. Vincent had been there through all of it, not controlling, not protecting, partnering, trusting her to do what she did best while he handled the parts she couldn't. Which is why, standing in his study a week after the arrests, Grace hadn't been entirely surprised when Vincent had dropped to one knee. I know this isn't the life you planned, he'd said, holding a ring that caught the light like captured fire. I know I'm complicated, dangerous. That loving me means living in a world most people can't imagine. But Grace, you make me better. You make me want to build something that lasts. Marry me. Be my partner in everything. My equal. My queen. She'd looked at this man who'd seen her when she was trying to be invisible, who'd believed in her when she'd lost faith in herself, who'd trusted her enough to let her fight her own battles, who'd loved her fiercely, protectively, but never at the cost of her autonomy. Yes, she'd said. Yes. He'd slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and Grace had felt it all the way to her soul. That was 3 years ago. Now Grace Lombardi, she'd taken his name, claimed it proudly, stood in her office overlooking Chicago, and smiled at the life she'd built. She was COO of Lombardi Industries, running a business empire that was 90% legitimate and growing. She consulted with the FBI's cybercrime division on cases, anonymously, carefully, but using her skills to help instead of hide. Her mother lived in a beautiful house with round-the-clock care, her lupus managed by the best specialists in the country. Grace had her master's degree. She and Vincent had twin daughters who were absolutely going to rule the world someday. Life was good, complicated, still dangerous sometimes, because Vincent's world would always have shadows. But good. The door opened. Vincent walked in with coffee and that smile, the one he saved just for her. Thought you could use this. You read my mind. She accepted the cup, let him pull her close. I've been reading your mind since the day I found you sleeping in my bed and decided to lock the door. Best decision you ever made? Second best. He kissed her temple. Best decision was hiring you in the first place. Grace laughed. You mean the woman who lied on her resume and used you as cover while running from the FBI? I mean the woman who turned out to be exactly what I didn't know I needed. His arms tightened around her. My partner. My equal. My everything. And standing there in their empire, Grace thought about that girl who'd been running scared 6 years ago, who'd taken a job as a maid to stay invisible, who'd fallen asleep in the wrong bed and woken up to find everything had changed. I love you, she said quietly. I know. Vincent's smile was soft. I've known since the moment you chose to trust me instead of run. Since you looked at the man everyone fears and decided to stay. Wasn't much of a choice. You locked the door. I gave you the option to leave. You gave me the option to be seen. She turned in his arms, met his eyes. That's what you've always done, Vincent. You saw me, really saw me. When I was trying so hard to disappear, you looked close enough to find me. And I'm never letting you disappear again, he promised. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Grace kissed him back. This complicated, dangerous, devoted man who'd changed her entire world. Who'd taken a fugitive analyst and made her a queen. It had started with a locked door and a choice to trust. It had grown into partnership, into love, into a life she'd never imagined but couldn't imagine living without. Grace Jackson had spent most of her life being invisible. But Grace Lombardi? She was finally, gloriously, powerfully seen. And that's how a fugitive became a queen. If you made it this far, you just experienced a story of survival, betrayal, and unexpected love. And I need to know, what was your favorite twist? Did you see Tom Richards' betrayal coming? Did you think Vincent was actually dirty? Or did you trust him from the start? Tell me in the comments right now. And tell me where you're watching from. Last week, we had viewers from 52 countries. If this story gave you chills, made you believe in second chances, or had you rooting for a mafia boss and a fugitive to find their happy ending, you need to subscribe because next week's story is even more intense. Hit that like button. It literally costs you nothing, but helps me massively. Share this with someone who loves romance with danger, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is let yourself be seen. But sometimes it's also the thing that saves you. Thank you.